Howdy, my name is Nonat, and welcome to the deep dive for the Magus class in Pathfinder 2e. And yes, I say Magus, not Magus, not Magus, not Moojus, not Maguses, Magus. I don't even think it's right. I believe Magus is correct, but I've said Magus my entire life, so settle down for the next hour, because you're going to hear Magus a lot. Secrets of Magic just released, and with it came the two new classes, one of which is the Magus here. So, if you want to see more Pathfinder 2e content, I'm going to be covering a ton of Secrets of Magic content in the near future. So go ahead and subscribe by clicking the button down below, and while you're down there, you might as well leave a like, right? I mean, it's right there. But let's not waste any more time talking about these amazing patrons over on the Nonat1's Patreon page. I can't waste your valuable time by talking about how incredible it is that these people help support the Nonat1's channel financially and receive some cool homebrew bonuses designed by me in return. It's a really cool thing, but don't worry, I'm not going to waste your time talking about it. Let's talk about the Magus. The Magus is a spellcaster, but their key ability score is strength or dexterity. Interestingly, you can't even pick intelligence as your key ability score if you wanted to. I think it would have been interesting to go with strength, dex, or intellect as your key ability score to give the Magus the opportunity and the option to still be an adept spellcaster with the ability to fight, but they're definitely leaning towards a more martial class lean that can use magic rather than a spellcaster that can also fight. Their hit points are a little bit below par, only getting 8 plus their constitution modifier, where the average martial gets 10, so they are a little squishier than your average fighter. The Magus is trained in perception and only trained in reflex saves, but they are expert in both fortitude and will saving throws, so they can still make some decent saves mid-combat and hopefully reduce some damage compared to a normal spellcaster. As far as skills go, Magi don't really get a whole lot. They only get Arcana and 2+ Intelligence, which will be a max of +3, so at most, you're getting 5 additional skills on top of Arcana. They are trained with martial weapons though, so really anything besides an advanced weapon is on the table for the Magus, and they get to be trained in medium armor as well. This is already huge, because there are some martial classes which are restricted to light armor, so being able to use medium along with putting dex as your key ability score, you can make a Magus with a really solid armor class. Just like a wizard, a Magus does have arcane spellcasting, and it works pretty much the same way. Prepare a specific spell into each of your spell slots, and you have that spell for the rest of the day or until you use it. Where they are very different from a wizard and different from most other spellcasters is the number of spell slots available to them. A Magus uses a system that I believe in 1st edition Pathfinder was called bounded spellcasting. The best way to explain it is with this chart here. As the Magus levels up, they actually lose their lowest level spell slot in exchange for higher level ones. But unless they take specific feats or features, they will never have more than 4 total spell slots per day. This is how they balance the character being able to fight as well as a martial class and cast spells. Even a level 20 Magus, unless they have specific features, only has 4 spell slots, and starting at 5th level, whenever you gain your ability to cast 3rd level spells, you lose the ability to cast 1st level spells. Well, how does this work for spells of 1st level? Can you never cast, I don't know, Spider Sting again? It's a bad example, but what if there's a 1st level spell that can't be heightened? Well, you can still fill a higher level spell slot with a lower level spell. If you really want to cast a 1st level spell that doesn't have a heightened effect, you can still prepare it in one of your spell slots, just keep in mind it won't have any other effect. And of course, we need to talk about the Magus's key feature, really the ability that makes a Magus, Spellstrike. For 2 actions, you select 1 spell from your prepared spell list, it can be a cantrip, and it must cost 1 or 2 actions and require a spell attack roll. So something like Burning Hands would not qualify, but Produce Flame would. You then make a melee strike with your weapon, and the spell you chose is imbued into your weapon. The spell attack roll of the spell is handled by the melee attack roll of your strike. If your weapon attack hits the target, then your spell attack hits as well. If you attack with a longsword, you will deal 1d8 plus strength, and let's say you used Produce Flame, an additional 1d6 plus intelligence on top of that, all in the same hit. Obviously, this is incredibly powerful, and if you could just do this for 2 actions every turn, it'd make the Magus the most broken character in the game. Luckily, Paizo has balanced it and makes the Magus very tactical and strategic to use. After using your Spellstrike, it must be recharged, and you have 2 options for how to do this. You can spend a single action to just recharge your Spellstrike, simple as that, or you can use a Magus Conflux spell, which is the Magus focus spell. It's worth mentioning it does specifically need to be a Conflux focus spell. If you take an archetype of another class and gain a focus spell from that class, those focus spells do not recharge your Spellstrike. There are a few specific rules when it comes to Spellstrike, and I'll really quickly go through them here. If you want really big detail about them, I'd read them yourself verbatim. Spellstrike can only target one enemy creature, unless you have feats that say otherwise. Even if you have a spell attack roll that can attack multiple targets, it only hits and damages your target. The reach of the spell is dependent on your weapon, not the spell itself. So even though Shocking Grasp says it has a 5-foot reach, if you have a glaive with 10-foot reach, you can deliver Shocking Grasp from 10 feet away. Likewise, you would never use the range of the spell for your strike. So the 120-foot range of Ray of Frost would not give your melee attack a 120-foot range. Ancillary effects is probably the most important one. If any spell you cast would have an effect that takes place after the spell attack roll, that still happens. The easiest example is Acid Splash. Should you make a spell strike with Acid Splash, you will only deal the main damage to the single target like normal, but the 1 Acid Splash damage still goes off, meaning if you attack them in melee, you will actually splash yourself for 1 acid damage. Like with a normal spell, if there's any saving throw that comes after the spell attack roll, that is still made as normal by your target. If you use a spell strike on a target that's immune to your spell, you do still expend both the spell slot and your spell strike. You don't get to get it back just because it had no effect. If a spell allows you to pick the number of actions spent, such as Ray of Fire, you can only select the 1 or 2 action version of that spell. Because Spellstrike needs to specifically be a 1 or 2 action spell, you cannot use the 3 action, or if it somehow exists, free action version of a spell for Spellstrike. And finally, you cannot use meta magic with Spellstrike unless it specifically says so. This is because meta magic only affects your next cast a spell activity, and Spellstrike is not cast a spell. Okay, let's talk about Arcane Cascade, which is sort of the new bread and butter of the Magus that wasn't in the playtest at all, and it's pretty cool. A class getting a stance just as a base class feature is really neat. This is typically what you'll use directly after using your first spell strike in a combat. For 1 action, if your last action was to cast a spell or spell strike, you enter Arcane Cascade, basically allowing the residual power of that spell to flow through you and power up your future attacks so long as you're in that stance. If you cast a spell that deals damage, then all future melee strikes while in this stance will deal 1 additional damage of the same type as the spell you cast. This increases to 2 additional damage and 3 additional damage whenever you get weapon specialization and greater weapon specialization. If the spell you cast does not deal damage, then the damage you gain from Arcane Cascade is based on the school of magic as seen in the text here. And with that, we've covered everything that all Magi get at level 1, so let's talk about their hybrid study. This is the Magus subclass, and boy, there are a lot of them. We'll start off with Inexorable Iron, which is for Great Weapon Magi. We'll start with Inexorable Iron for the 2-handed weapon Magus. If you start your turn in your Arcane Cascade stance while wielding a 2-handed weapon, you just gain temporary hit points equal to half your level, minimum of 1. This is every turn. They refresh, they do not stack. Remember that you cannot benefit from temporary hit points from more than one source. So even if you take no damage that turn, you don't get more hit points, okay? You don't cheat, otherwise this would be broken. But you can think of this as easy damage reduction every single single turn equal to half your level for one attack. It's really good. They also get the Thunderous Strike Conflux spell. Now I get to go all the way down to Conflux spells, and then back up, and then back down, and then back up. Thunderous Strike is a single action focus spell that allows you to make a melee strike with a two-handed weapon you are currently holding. The damage from the strike is your normal weapon damage. However, the target and every other target within a 15-foot cone must make a basic fortitude save against 2 additional sonic damage. And if they happen to fail their save, they are knocked prone. This is not going to do a ton of damage, but being able to knock prone just for a single action focus spell isn't bad, and remember, this also recharges your Spellstrike. Every 2 levels when this is heightened, the sonic damage only goes up by 1. You're really using this for the knocked prone effect, not for the additional damage. The Laughing Shadow Magus is a lot more diverse in the different types of builds that can use it. The only requirement for Laughing Shadow is that you are unarmored. This is almost a hybrid of the Monk and Rogue, because whenever you're in the Arcane Cascade stance, you gain a bonus to your move speed of 5 feet, or 10 feet if you are unarmored, and you deal additional damage to flat-footed targets. The damage is the same as your Arcane Cascade. Instead of 1, 2, and 3 bonus damage, you deal 3, 5, or 7 bonus damage with every attack. So if you're playing an agile, finesse, weapon, dex, no armor, you're zipping around the battlefield, you're stabbing everybody, it adds up. The big limitation is that you can only be using a single weapon and a free hand. However, you will see that there is a lot of support for an unarmed Magus. And remember, unarmed counts as having 1 free hand, which qualifies for Laughing Shadow. Laughing Shadow gets the Dimensional Assault Conflux spell. Dimensional Assault is really simple. For 1 action, you teleport up to half your speed and make a melee strike against an adjacent target. This is just really good. Again, you get to recharge your Spellstrike, you get to move, and you get to attack, all for 1 action and a focus point. That's fantastic. Sparkling Targe is fascinating. This is for a shield-based Magus. Just taking this subclass permanently upgrades every shield you wield for the entire game, making you able to shield block against things like Dragon's Breath and Magic Missile, which is usually not possible. You of course gain the Shield Block General feat, and so long as you're in your Arcane Cascade stance, the armor class bonus from your shield also applies to all of your saving throws against magical effects. This is an insane passive ability because it's assumed you're at least using a steel shield, giving you a +2 to every saving throw and armor class against magic. The Sparkling Targe Magus is kind of the ultimate anti-mage, which is amazing. Also, you can shield block spells so long as you're in Arcane Cascade. So, if someone uses Burning Hands and you're caught in the cone, you can use shield block to reduce the damage by your shield's hardness. This is absolutely insane, and I love it. Oh, by the way, when you shield block against spells like this, your shield's hardness increases by the damage bonus of Arcane Cascade. So at level 1, if you're blocking a spell, you gain +1 hardness on your shield while in Arcane Cascade. This is probably my favorite subclass of Magus, and it's just so powerful, and it makes... Don't bring up the champion, don't bring up the champion, don't bring up the champion. It makes defensive plays really fun and feel great. The Sparkling Targe gets Shielding Strike as their conflux spell. Shielding Strike is a really cool focus spell and a very unique way to have great action economy. For 1 action, you make a melee strike, and then you can either raise a shield or cast shield, one or the other. This is just 2 actions for 1 action and a focus point, and it's great. As long as you have a focus point, this means you can move. No, you can't. My brain's dumb. This is great. This means that you can Spellstrike and Shielding Strike on the same turn to attack with a spell, attack a second time, recharge your Spellstrike, and raise a shield. This is incredible action economy and gives the Sparkling Targe just so many options in combat, unlike some defensive characters at low levels. And it could be any class. Starlit Span is a very simple subclass of Magus. This just allows you to use Spellstrike with ranged attacks. The limitation, however, is that it must be within the first range increment of this ranged attack. So if you're using a short bow, you can only Spellstrike within 60 feet. What's interesting, though, is it specifically states you can use it with ranged, unarmed strikes. Something like, oh, I don't know, a Leshy's Seed Pods? Seed Pod Magus Leshy, thank you very much, Paizo, I love you. They also get the Shooting Star Conflux spell. Shooting Star is pretty cool and a nice support-focused spell. For one action, you make a ranged strike against a target. If the target is concealed, you get to ignore the concealment. And if they are behind cover, you get to reduce the stage of their cover by 1. Greater to standard, standard to lesser, or if they're just behind lesser cover, it doesn't count at all. On top of that, your attack leaves a trail to the target, meaning that anyone else who attacks that target before your next turn also gets the benefit of cover and concealment ignoring. This is fantastic, especially if the enemy just went and you get to go, you can shoot them with this. Even if you if you miss, it doesn't count. Never mind, if you miss, you don't get the bonus for your allies. So you gotta make sure you hit. But if you do, it's real good. And of course, it recharges your Spellstrike. Can you tell these are first impressions sometimes, and that I don't script these videos? And the final subclass of Magus is the Twisting Tree, which is a staff-specific fighting style. If you wield a staff in one hand, it deals a d6 instead of a d4, and it gains the Agile trait, so you're just super fast and dexterous while one-handing a staff. If you happen to two-hand the staff, it gains additional weapon traits. If you're two-handing it, it gets parry, reach, and trip. Reach gives you a 10-foot reach with the weapon. Trip allows you to apply the staff's item bonuses to your trip checks, and the parry trait even gives you the option to raise your armor class by 1 by spending an action. These are all really good options to have and makes the staff a much more viable weapon. What's really cool about this subclass is it's all about changing your handle on the staff as you fight mid-combo. Basically, as a free action, whenever you make a strike with the staff, you can change your grip from two-hand to one-hand, changing it from a d8 to a d6 or back. What this is great for is attacking with the d8 version and then letting go and making the rest of your attacks with the d6 one-hand version because it gains the Agile trait. This is a really unique opportunity to attack with a heavier weapon and then instantly attack with a lighter one. It's similar to dual wielding, but just way cooler. You can also spend a free action to change your grip again at the end of your turn to return to the two-handed staff version. And the conflux spell for the Twisting Tree is Spinning Staff. They really like alliteration. Spinning Staff is sort of like the monk's Flurry of Blows. For one action and a focus point, you get to make 2 attacks. However, they do need to be against 2 different targets, and your multiple attack penalty does apply as normal. So your second attack will take whatever penalty you would have on it. This is really strong. Of course, it recharges your Spellstrike, and just one action for 2 attacks is amazing on anybody. The Magus is really cool, guys! And that's it for level 1 Magus features. They get their spells, of course, but other than that, what you see is what you get. Let's go over what they get from levels 2 through 20 as well. Of course, they get Magus feats at level 2 because they are a spellcaster. Remember that the Magus is not a martial class in practice. Because martial classes get feats at level 1, a Magus gets their first feat at level 2. Their first 5 levels aren't super exciting. Skill feats, general feats, skill increases, ability boosts, all pretty standard stuff. Also at 5th level, they get ancestry feats, their reflex saves increase to expert to match their other 2 saving throws, and they do get weapon expertise right alongside all other martials. Now 7th level is where things get really interesting for the Magus, with their Studious Spells feature. These grant you additional spell slots on top of your typical 4 for the day. However, none of the spells you're going to get from this feature are offensive in nature. This is a way to allow the Magus's 4 limited spell slots to all be saved for combat and give them additional spells to use for utility and roleplay. Every Magus, regardless of their subclass, can prepare Spider Climb, True Strike, and Water Breathing. Additionally, you get an extra spell depending on your subclass. Mirror Image for the Laughing Shadow, Resist Energy for the Sparkling Targe, Dark Vision for Starlit Span, Enlarge for Inexorable Iron, and Magic Mouth for Twisting Tree. At levels 11 and 13, all of these spells get heightened to 3rd and 4th level respectively, and you get even more spells depending on your subclass, which I'm not going to go into here. You can read them. But it is important to note that all Magi at level 11 can prepare Haste, and all Magi at level 13 can prepare Fly. This is very powerful, and yes, this means regardless of subclass, regardless of anything, all level 13 Magi can cast Fly. Weapon Specialization at level 7, increasing your flat damage and giving you bonus damage to Arcane Cascade. Alertness at level 9 to increase perception checks to Expert. Expert spellcasting is self-explanatory at level 9, and also at level 9 you get your will saves increased to Master and auto crit succeed normal successes. The Magus doesn't see an armor increase until level 11 when their medium armor increases to Expert proficiency, and at level 13 their weapon proficiency increases to Master with martial and simple weapons. Level 15 nabs them Greater Weapon Specialization, which also increases the damage of Arcane Cascade. Keep in mind, that's a flat bonus 3 damage while in the stance, on top of the 6 additional damage from using Master Proficiency weapons. Basically, as long as you're in Arcane Cascade, all of your attacks are dealing a flat 9 bonus damage before rolling anything. Very nice. Level 15 also bumps Fortitude saves up to Master and auto crit succeeds normal successes. Level 17 is pretty boring, but still decent upgrades. Both proficiency in medium armor and proficiency in spellcasting increase to Master. Finally, level 19's capstone isn't amazingly overpowered, more so it's very nice. You get double Spellstrike. Whenever you make a Spellstrike, you get to leave an echo of that spell inside of your weapon. So long as you recharge your Spellstrike and use it again within 1 minute, you can use the same spell again without expending a spell slot. This effectively doubles your number of spell strikes per day, which is very powerful, but keep in mind if you want to make use of this feature, it has to be the exact same spell. You can still spell strike with a different spell without wasting any time, but you will lose the echo of the spell if you use something different. And that is going to be the end of part 1 of the Magus deep dive. I'm really sorry to split this into 2 separate videos, but unfortunately I have to travel to visit a friend who's getting married. I'm going to Gen Con next week, and I'm visiting my grandparents 2 weeks after that, so time is a little bit limited, and I need to stretch out the content a little bit. Don't worry, mid-October, when all of this is all over, content will be back to its normal schedule. Thank you for understanding, and part 2 of the Magus deep dive should be out next week. So thank you all so much. Be sure to leave a comment, tell me what kind of Magus you plan to play. Do you love the Magus? Make fun of me for saying Magus and not Magus or Maguses. Thank you all very much for watching. Thank you to my patrons for supporting me. There is a link in the description to the No Nat One's Patreon if you want to help support me like those amazing people we saw at the beginning of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and most importantly, have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, No Nat One.